Gustavo González López just became the most powerful man in Venezuela. Triple position, triple control, one single objective: execute the orders arriving directly from Washington. The same general who just 3 months ago was being labeled a traitor within Chavismo now holds in his hands the intelligence apparatus, the presidential military household, and now the Ministry of Defense. And if you think this is simply a reshuffling of pieces on the board, I invite you to stay until the end, because what is happening inside Fuerte Tiuna has no precedent in the recent history of this country. Vladimir Padrino López has been removed. The news many were waiting for finally materialized this Wednesday, March 18th, 2026. But this story is not about the general who leaves. It is about the one who enters. It is about understanding how one man managed to betray every one of his fellow leaders and end up seated on the throne of military power. It is about grasping what it means that the head of the presidential military household, the man in charge of intelligence, now also commands the armed forces of a nation, navigating the most convulsive moment of its contemporary history. Today, we are going to unravel who Gustavo González López really is. We are going to analyze that photograph that circulated weeks ago, showing him shaking hands with the director of the CIA on Venezuelan soil. We are going to examine why the United States trusts him, and why Delcy Rodriguez has made him her designated executioner. And above all, we are going to answer the question everyone is asking: who is next on the list? Because if Padrino fell, Diosdado Cabello should be counting the days he has left. The confirmation arrived in the morning hours. Sources close to the process confirmed that the decision had been made weeks ago, but internal tensions had delayed the official announcement. Let us remember that on January 6th, barely 3 days after the events that shook the country, Delcy Rodriguez demanded Vladimir Padrino's resignation. The then minister's response was negative. He flatly refused to abandon his position, reviving that grimly famous phrase from April 11th, 2002. Only this time, there was nobody willing to back him up. Washington's pressure proved relentless. The United States had set Padrino López's departure as a non-negotiable condition for advancing any process of understanding, and Delcy Rodriguez, in her role as administrator of this forced transition, had no choice but to comply with the demand. What was originally scheduled for July 5th ended up being dramatically accelerated. Tell me in the comments, do you believe Padrino will end up in an American prison, or will he manage to escape to Europe? I want to read your predictions. Now, what is truly revealing about this political moment is not the fall of Padrino. It is the meteoric rise of González López. To understand the magnitude of what is happening, we need to step back a few months and observe the board with perspective. This general was one of those identified within Chavismo itself as part of the traitors who facilitated the capture of Nicolás Maduro on January 3rd. The internal accusations were ferocious. There was talk of complicity, of coordination with foreign forces, of a calculated handover. And yet here he is, not only surviving the accusations, but emerging from them strengthened, rewarded, one could say, with a level of power that no other military officer has held in decades. When you control intelligence, you have the eyes. When you control the presidential military household, you have custody of power itself. When you control the Ministry of Defense, you have the weapons. González López now has all three. That is the real panorama of Venezuela at this moment. But the uncomfortable question is inevitable. How does a man go from labeled traitor to all-powerful in just 75 days? The answer lies in that photograph that many saw circulating in February, and that few knew how to interpret correctly. González López appeared shaking hands with the director of the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States. The encounter took place in Caracas. It was not a protocol greeting or a diplomatic coincidence. It was the handshake that sealed an agreement, the precise moment when Washington designated its trusted man in Venezuelan territory. While other generals hesitated, while the Chavista leadership fragmented between divided loyalties, González López made a decision that would define his future. He chose to collaborate. He chose to hand over information. He chose to align himself with the side that was clearly going to prevail. And the United States, pragmatic as always in these circumstances, accepted the offer. They needed someone on the inside, someone with access, someone willing to sacrifice their own colleagues in exchange for their own survival. González López met every requirement, and now he controls the entire military apparatus of a country that is technically still in Chavista hands. The irony is almost poetic, if it were not so tragic. For 26 years, Chavismo built a system based on ideological loyalty, on revolutionary commitment, on the supposed brotherhood between comrades. And in the end, it all collapsed through internal betrayal. It was not the sanctions that brought down Maduro, though they helped. It was not the opposition, though they contributed. It was the survival ambition of those who swore eternal loyalty and ended up selling the boss to the highest bidder. Delcy Rodriguez understood this before anyone else. That is why she remains in power. That is why she administers this transition while others fall one by one. She has converted betrayal into an art of governance. She has perfected cynicism to levels that would be admirable if they were not so repugnant. Let us look at the inventory of what she has delivered so far. Alex Saab, the prized frontman, the man who knew every financial secret of the leadership, is now behind bars coordinating his cooperation with American justice. Raul Gorin, the media mogul, the businessman who laundered incalculable fortunes, also captured and reportedly under house arrest, according to the most recent information. I ask you directly, how many more need to fall before you believe this is serious? Write that number in the comments. The list keeps extending. Camila Fabry, Saab's wife and until recently a vice minister, removed from her position without contemplation. Cecilia Flores, the former daughter-in-law of the dictator, stripped of her position in the Ministry of Health. The Cuban Minister of Tourism, expelled, though in a typical twist of the prevailing cynicism, she was replaced by the daughter of Diosdado Cabello. One step forward, one step back. The net balance on that particular move is zero. But the general pattern remains undeniable. Also remaining in prison are Liscano and Pulido, direct collaborators in the frontman network that administered the personal fortune of the man who once occupied Miraflores. More than a dozen positions have been eliminated, most of them linked precisely to the custody of those illicit funds. Washington is following the money, and Delcy Rodriguez is opening every door for them. The Mission Robert Serra has been eliminated. The so-called Plan Gorgojo, that scheme through which digital propagandists were paid to defend the regime on social media, has been dismantled. Foundations like ProPatria, responsible for shady dealings including the famous luxury airport project at Maiquetía, are also being intervened. That project, by the way, directly involved the first husband of Celia Flores and her own children, the same ones who should now feel a permanent chill running down their spines. Nicolásito, as the dictator's son is popularly known, along with his step-siblings, figure among those sought by American justice. They are being formally requested, and in the current context, where absolutely nobody seems safe from being the next one sacrificed, their peace of mind should be non-existent. But let us return to the protagonist of this moment. Gustavo González López represents a phenomenon that deserves careful analysis, because we are not simply looking at a change of minister, we are looking at the consolidation of a military power completely subordinated to Washington's interests, operating within a formal structure that still preserves the symbols and rituals of Chavismo. It is an extraordinarily peculiar situation. Delcy Rodriguez holds the title. Jorge Rodriguez keeps appearing on television. The ministries retain their revolutionary names, but the real power, the effective power, the power that decides who lives politically and who dies, that power now responds to instructions coming from the north. And González López is the designated executor for implementing those instructions. The implications for Diosdado Cabello are devastating. For years, he was considered the second most powerful man in the country. Many analysts even suggested he was the first, that Maduro only occupied the facade while Cabello pulled the strings from the shadows. He controlled the colectivos. He had decisive influence over military sectors. He managed businesses of every nature. He was, in short, untouchable. He is untouchable no longer. The information we are handling indicates that the United States has handed him an ultimatum with a clear expiration date. He must leave the country before the end of April. He has no margin of negotiation on this point. The alternative is simple. He leaves voluntarily toward an agreed-upon exile, or he faces the consequences of resistance. The particular problem for Cabello is that no country appears willing to receive him. Vladimir Padrino, at least, has contacts in Brussels, bridges built in the heart of Europe that could facilitate some refuge. His children hold Spanish nationality, though Spain would hardly agree to host him given the political weight that Venezuela carries in the national agenda, with nearly 1 million Venezuelan citizens residing on Spanish soil. But Cabello lacks even those options. His file is too heavy. The accusations against him are too serious. The enemies he has accumulated over the years are too numerous. Nobody wants to carry that burden. Nobody wants to become the destination of the man who for decades was synonymous with repression, corruption, and abuse of power. So the question arises naturally. What real options does Diosdado Cabello have left? Exile appears closed. Remaining in Venezuela has been explicitly ruled out by Washington in every scenario contemplated. There is no variant of the three-phase plan the United States is managing where Cabello can stay on Venezuelan territory exercising any form of influence. The third option is prison, and that possibility becomes increasingly tangible with each passing day that he fails to accept the offered conditions. The precedent of Maduro should serve as a warning. In November 2025, when the ultimatum expired with no cooperation, they went all in to capture him. There were no second chances. The machinery activated and executed what it had to execute. Cabello knows perfectly well the same can happen to him. Meanwhile, the circle tightens. With González López now controlling the armed forces, the maneuvering spaces are shrinking dramatically. The colectivos are being disarmed in many areas. The police forces that responded to Cabello are being neutralized or redirected. The apparatus of force that once made him feel invincible is crumbling piece by piece. And he knows it. He may display defiance publicly, but privately he must be frantically calculating his next move. What about Vladimir Padrino? His case represents the clearest example of how these negotiated transitions work. He served as Minister of Defense for more than a decade. He appears among the most sanctioned military officers on the continent. He carries a $15 million reward offered by American authorities for his capture, accused of belonging to the so-called Cartel de los Soles. And yet his departure is being handled amicably. No handcuffs waiting at the ministry door, no helicopters preparing a forced extraction operation. He simply vacates the position, will likely remain temporarily in Venezuela, and will then attempt to relocate to some European destination where his Brussels contacts can facilitate refuge. The contradiction is evident. A man wanted for international drug trafficking, identified as a key piece in a criminal organization that used state institutions to traffic drugs, is going to retire quietly to enjoy the fruits of decades of corruption. That is the reality of negotiated transitions. Those who cooperate receive benefits. Those who facilitate the fall of their own allies receive rewards. It may not be fair, it may generate legitimate outrage, but that is how these processes work. More than 600 political prisoners have been released so far. Jorge Rodriguez announced yesterday in an appearance alongside José Luis Rodríguez Zapatero that precautionary measures have been lifted for more than 7,000 Venezuelans. That information requires independent verification because the credibility of the spokesperson is non-existent. But even if partially true, it represents a significant change compared to the situation that prevailed just 3 months ago. The problem is that while Diosdado Cabello remains in the country, many exiles will not return. Political persecutees will not feel safe. Amnesty guarantees will lack real credibility. His presence contaminates every attempt at normalization. He is a constant reminder that the old regime still has the capacity to inflict damage. That is why Washington insists on his departure. This is not only about justice, though that component exists. It is about political viability. No transition process can consolidate itself with figures like Cabello operating freely within the territory. Those designing the strategy from the State Department understand this perfectly. I would like to know your opinion. Do you believe Diosdado will accept leaving peacefully, or will he force a confrontation? Leave your answer below. The 150 generals who, according to our information, are aligned with the United States are going to experience a significant rise in coming weeks. July 5th is marked as the date for important military changes. A deep restructuring of the military command is expected, with the definitive displacement of those who still maintain loyalties toward the old order. González López will be the one executing that purge. Ironic that a man accused of treason is now the one determining who is loyal and who is not. But coherence has never been a characteristic of these processes. What matters is effectiveness. And so far, González López has proven extraordinarily effective at carrying out the orders he receives. His photograph with the CIA director will remain in history as the symbol of this moment, the handshake that certified the complete subordination of Venezuela's military establishment to American interests. Some will call it treason against the homeland. Others will consider it necessary pragmatism. What nobody can deny is that today he holds the power, and his former colleagues are on their way to exile or prison. Venezuela is no longer territory controlled by Chavismo. It is territory administered by Chavismo under American supervision. That distinction is crucial for understanding what comes next. The forms are maintained, the symbols persist, but effective power has changed hands. And those who still believe that Delcy Rodriguez truly governs this country are confusing the facade with the structure. The delinate, as some have begun calling this period, functions because Washington allows it to function. Every important decision requires external approval. Every significant movement responds to instructions coming from the north. Delcy Rodriguez is an administrator, not a ruler. Her margin of maneuver is limited to executing what others decide. That is why she delivered Saab. That is why she delivered Goran. That is why she is now delivering Padrino. And that is why she will eventually have to deliver Cabello, whether she likes it or not. Because resisting would mean sharing Maduro's fate. And she has made it very clear she has absolutely no intention of sacrificing herself for anyone. Marco Rubio warned her in January. Trump did too. If she did not cooperate, she would face the same consequences as the captured dictator. The message was received and perfectly understood. Since then, every week brings new proof of her willingness to comply with what is required. This is not a democratic transition. This is the ordered liquidation of a criminal regime. The difference matters. A democratic transition would imply free elections, independent institutions, constitutional guarantees. None of that exists yet. What exists is a controlled dismantling process where the pieces fall according to an externally established schedule. Venezuelans observe this spectacle with mixed feelings. There is satisfaction in seeing those who abused power for decades fall. But there is also frustration because justice appears selective, because some criminals receive preferential treatment while others are sacrificed. That frustration is understandable. After 26 years of oppression, of lies, of systematic impoverishment, people expected complete justice. They expected to see every responsible party face consequences for their actions. The reality is more complex and less satisfying. Political change processes rarely deliver the perfect justice that victims deserve. There are always negotiations, always compromises, always guilty parties who escape in exchange for facilitating the fall of others. Is this acceptable? Each person will have to answer that question according to their own conscience. What is undeniable is that change is occurring, slowly, imperfectly, but it is occurring. 6 months ago, Maduro was still in Miraflores. Today, he is under American custody. 3 months ago, Padrino controlled the armed forces. Today, he is out of the ministry looking for somewhere to hide. The pattern will continue. Cabello will be next. Then others will follow. The building constructed over a quarter century is collapsing floor by floor. Some floors fall quickly. Others offer more resistance. But the direction of the process is unambiguous. González López represents the new reality. A military officer willing to serve whoever holds real power. Yesterday, it was Chavismo. Today, it is Washington. Tomorrow, it will be whoever corresponds. The ideological loyalty never truly existed. Only the survival calculation existed. Fuerte Tiuna today has a new master. The officers who yesterday swore loyalty to the Bolivarian Revolution today receive instructions coming from the Pentagon. The transformation is total, though invisible to those who only look at the surface. We are going to continue following this story. We will be attentive to the official announcement of Padrino's departure. We will be watching every movement of González López. We will be monitoring Cabello's steps as the April deadline approaches. And of course, we will be reporting on every new development, because this is only just beginning. The coming months are going to bring changes that today we cannot even imagine. Venezuela is living through an unprecedented historic moment. A regime that appeared immovable is crumbling before our eyes. Figures we believed all-powerful discover that their power was borrowed and that the true owners have decided to reclaim it. González López, seated in the office that Padrino occupied for more than 10 years, perfectly symbolizes this moment. The rewarded traitor, the compensated collaborator, the survivor who read the winds of change before anyone else. Some will say he is an intelligent pragmatist. Others will say he is an unprincipled opportunist. Both characterizations are probably correct. What nobody can dispute is that today he holds the power, and his former companions are on their way to exile or prison. The Venezuelan board has never been clearer and simultaneously more confusing. Clear is the direction, the dismantling of Chavismo under American supervision. Confused is the final destination. Nobody knows exactly what Venezuela will look like when this process concludes. Meanwhile, we continue reporting, we continue analyzing, we continue accompanying you on this historic journey. And I ask one final favor. Comment below who you believe will be the next to fall after Diosdado. I read every one of you. It has been a privilege to share this analysis with you. My name is Laura Salazar, and this has been Punto de Quiebra al Minuto. We will see you in the next installment, where we will continue unraveling every chapter of this historic transformation that our Venezuela is living. Take care, stay informed, and remember, the change is already here. Yeah.